Tuesday, April 18, 2000. Protesters clashed with police in the nation's capital, but failed to disrupt world finance meetings. And will Wall Street's rally continue today and reassure investors sinking stock values are history? A look at the markets come back just ahead.
First Business, America's news and information leader. Now, here's Trish McShane.
Good morning from Washington. Barton Eckert is on assignment. World Bank and International Monetary Fund officials have ended their meetings here in Washington. Their 2 days of talks went on despite massive protests throughout downtown streets that led to over 1,300 arrests. First Business correspondent Pat Rogers reports.
Despite isolated clashes such as this one, protests were peaceful. Police respected protesters' rights to demonstrate, and with only a few exceptions, protesters respected police authority and boundaries. D.C. police did, however, resort to tear gas and force in some cases.
Keep the streets open and get back to normal, and people just need to realize that protest is over now.
That might have been wishful thinking. The protests, which centered on this barricade placed near the International Monetary Fund, went on for hours. But the crowds of thousands that protest leaders predicted never materialized, perhaps because of the steady rain. Still, several hundred people showed up to demonstrate against the World Bank and IMF.
I believe that the World Bank should be shut down or at least reformed. The policies they're implementing are not effective, and they're not interested in the efficacy of their programming.
I think it's about time that they be held accountable, and that there be some way of knowing what's going on.
Protesters claim the IMF and World Bank saddle third world countries with debt they can never repay and perpetuate poverty rather than work to end it. IMF and World Bank officials say that's flat wrong.
We have to look at the glass as half full, not half empty. But I think all of us recognize, and I'm speaking for myself now, that the issue of poverty and development is not something that will be uniquely solved by the bank or by the fund.
Despite the demonstrations, the IMF and World Bank officials all arrived safely and held meetings as scheduled. Demonstrators failed to deliver on their threat to shut down the meetings. In Washington, Pat Rogers, First Business.
Investors breathed a deep sigh of relief after both the Dow Jones Industrials and the NASDAQ closed with massive gains after experiencing some strong volatility earlier in the session. The Dow finished up 276 points, while a late surge on the NASDAQ sent the tech index soaring to a 217-point gain, its largest ever. The long bond yielding 5.9%, the NYSE Composite climbing 8.75 points, volume over 1 billion shares. Leading the market higher, IBM gaining almost 7 after losing 15% last week, and Hewlett-Packard down 22% last week, rebounded with almost an 11-point gain. Eli Lilly also higher. The maker of the top-selling antidepressant Prozac also beat analysts' earnings forecasts. Johnson & Johnson rose following a Barron's report that the company's shares could hit 100 as it cuts costs and profits rise. And Procter & Gamble up 6 after getting FDA approval for its bone-building drug Aventis. And for more on the market's dramatic comeback, here's correspondent Leslie Dodson of Reuters Financial Television in New York.
It looked bad to start the day with both the NASDAQ and the Dow trading lower. But bargain hunting amongst the big cap tech shares boosted both indices into positive territory by the end of the session. Apparently feeling it was safe to step back into the water after last week's tech train wreck, investors piled back into network and semiconductor shares. Getting a boost from analyst upgrades, Cisco Systems and Intel gained back well over 10% each, while Oracle and Sun also joined the rush late in the session. Financials looked ready to soar after several brokerages and banks turned in glowing earnings reports before the bell. Discount broker Charles Schwab said its quarterly earnings nearly doubled, and the country's largest brokerage, Merrill Lynch, topped $1 billion in profits. Citigroup says its profits rose more than 50% on the back of steady growth in its banking division. But by the end of the session, investors turned skeptical about whether the good times can continue, turning in mixed returns on the day. And automaker Ford reported that last year's record domestic sales boosted the bottom line with first quarter profits of more than $2 billion. Now, the world's second largest car company says it expects annual sales this year to rival last year's record levels, reassuring investors who sent the stock up 4 3/4. Looking at the final numbers, the Dow gained back more than 2.5%, the S&P 500 added 45, and the NASDAQ rocketed up more than 200 points. And that's the Reuters market report from the New York Stock Exchange. I'm Leslie Dodson.
New figures out this morning confirm what a lot of investors already know. Many mutual funds were hit hard during last week's dramatic sell-off on Wall Street. Fund tracker Morningstar says technology funds in particular were hit with losses of nearly 30% in just 5 trading days. Mid-cap growth funds lost an average of just over 22%. Small growth funds slipped nearly 21.5% for the week. Other big losers were communications funds, down 18.8%, and large growth funds off 15.7%. Well, fund managers at Fidelity Magellan, one of the nation's largest mutual funds, boosted holdings in technology stocks from 30 to 35% just before the recent market meltdown. Analysts say some investors were hurt by the moves. Fidelity managers have also changed around some of the fund's top holdings, with GE replacing Microsoft as the fund's #1 holding. Time Warner and Intel were also added to the Fidelity's top 10 list, replacing Walmart and Lucent Technologies. Checking your national business forecast this morning, unsettled weather patterns across much of the country. With details, here's All News Channel's Rob Pendleton.
Cloudy skies on much of the west coast today. A storm system also pushes through the Rockies. Low pressure in the plains could spawn some rough weather. A cool down is in store for the Great Lakes behind a cold front. Sunshine in the southeast, but showers moving into New England. For highs, 50s in most of the Rockies, 50s and 60s up north, 70s from the nation's midsection down to Florida, 80s in the mid-south, and 90s in parts of Texas. Rob Pendleton, First Business.
Every year, people spend millions of dollars on the latest diet that promises to melt those pounds away the quickest. In today's Medical Digest, we take a look at a new diet drug that medical experts say actually helps the body lose fat. Robin Ryan has restocked her refrigerator with lots of fruits and veggies so she can dish up a healthy lunch, a meal she never would have eaten a year ago.
No, I would have had a Wendy burger or something like that.
That was before Ryan's husband John underwent bypass surgery, a health scare that told Robin it was time to shed more than 70 pounds. So Robin turned to Zenical, generic name Orlistat, and has already lost 9 pounds.
It blocks the enzyme that helps your body to absorb fat. So if you're eating a diet that has 30% fat, that drug essentially will reduce that to a 20% fat diet.
The excess fat is passed naturally from the body, but if you eat more than 30% fat, the side effects are uncomfortable, cramping, and loose stool. Zenical can help patients lose 5 to 10% of their body weight, and studies show the drug helps keep the weight off. Robin digs even further to trim fat from her diet through low-fat recipes. That, coupled with exercise, is her recipe for a healthier life.
I want to go out shopping again, buy all new clothes, and be happy being healthy.
Zenical is only offered by prescription, and patients should be closely monitored by a doctor.
Today's Medical Digest is brought to you by Senecot, the natural vegetable laxative. You'll feel so good. Senecot Good.
Still ahead on First Business, the latest developments in the custody standoff over 6-year-old Elian Gonzalez coming up.
Are you one of the millions of American males who would like increased sexual energy? If you've been considering Viagra as a solution, consider something different. All natural Enerx. Clinical studies show various ingredients of Enerx EnerX, enhance sexual energy, increasing desire, performance, and satisfaction. EnerX is all natural with no side effects. With EnerX, you'll feel the increased energy within minutes and with no chemicals. We're so sure you and your mate will be completely satisfied. We'll offer you a 30-day, no questions asked, full refund. EnerX stimulates sexual energy by expanding the blood vessels, causing increased blood flow to specific areas of the body. Unleash the power of EnerX now.
Call 1-800-382-2680 in the next 10 minutes and find out how you can save 30% off the retail price. Take advantage of our special TV offer. Call 1-800-382-2680.
Oh, I feel good, like I knew that I would now. I feel good, like I knew that I would now. So good, so good, I gotta use.
Senecot laxative tablets work like second nature, comfortably overnight. Senecot, the natural vegetable laxative. You'll feel so good. Senecot good.
I feel nice.
Among our top stories in the headlines this morning, what happens next with 6-year-old Cuban boy Elian Gonzalez? For more on that, here's All News Channel's Liz Brumman. Good morning, Liz.
Good morning, Trish. Good morning, everyone. Miami Mayor Joe Carollo will fly to Washington today to meet with federal officials about the dispute over Elian Gonzalez. Meantime, outside the boy's Miami home, loud protests turned to prayers. Cuban Americans there are awaiting the next phase of the custody battle, likely to be played out in court as the family faces off with the Justice Department. A judge last week issued a temporary order keeping the boy in the U.S. Elian's father is still in Washington, where he hopes to be reunited with the boy. If you got your taxes in by the midnight deadline, you can breathe a sigh of relief. But as millions of people rush to meet this year's deadline, a new study brings some depressing news. The Tax Foundation says Americans will work an average of 4 months this year just to pay their federal, state, and local taxes. One way of looking at it, from now until May 3rd, you'll be working to pay Uncle Sam. And that's a wrap of National Headlines. I'm Liz Brumman for First Business. Trish.
Thanks a lot, Liz. On Asian markets overnight, stocks opened up sharply. But in Japan, the Nikkei slid on news 30 stocks are being dropped from the index. The dollar was trading at just over 104, yen up 1.08 from late Monday. The Nikkei closed down at 0.22% to finish at 18,969. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng rebounded strongly, blue chips gaining ground there. Other Asian markets also up, bolstered by Wall Street's rally. Checking the markets in the UK this morning, the FTSE 100 took the elevator straight down on the heels of last week's huge sell-off on Wall Street. The FTSE 100 losing 183.5 points, the yen up, the pound down, the Swiss franc gaining, the euro off. Brent North Sea crude closed down 33 cents at $22.74 the barrel in New York trading. Stocks finished flat in Mexico City. Despite recovering from huge losses in the early going, the Bolsa IPC closed down just over 7 points at 63.08. The peso strengthened to 9.4 to the dollar. The House of Representatives returns to session on May 2nd, and 3 weeks later, a vote is set to take place on whether China will be granted permanent normal trade relations. First Business correspondent Dan Cush reports.
Congress needs to